The word doorknob reminds me of an unpleasant experience. I was a bit hesitant to share this story, and I'm not the best writer, but here it goes. This happened in my old apartment. I'm very grateful that I am no longer living there, and by the end of this story, you should know why. I used to live in a pretty small 2-room apartment in a rural area. It was your basic starter apartment. It was nice, and I lived at the end of the first floor. I lived there for a number of months in absolute peace until one day, out of nowhere, things began to happen in the apartment. I awoke one night to hear something strange. It sounded as if someone was murmuring or whispering in the living room. At first I didn't pay it much mind. I assumed a neighbor was on the phone or someone had left the TV on while they slept, and the sound was just leaking into my apartment somehow. It began to creep me out a bit when I heard it the next night, and then the next night. I went on to hear this strange murmuring for about 10 days straight. It frightened me so much to the point I developed a neurosis about it. I tried sleeping with the lights on, but that didn't help much. It was always playing on my mind. If I had the opportunity to stay at a friend's or a work colleague's place, I would always take it. I didn't want to talk about what was happening at home to begin with, since I thought that no one would believe me. But I realized that I had reached my limits. I hadn't been home for 5 days, and that wasn't right, so I confided in a co-worker. Strangely enough, she said she believed me. Maybe she saw how much this creepy, unexplainable voice had affected me. I was too scared to sleep in my own apartment. The following day was a day off for me and my co-worker friend, so she agreed to come to my place. I unlocked the door, and my friend grabbed the doorknob and went to open the door, but she froze and let out a little scream. The doorknob began to shake in front of our eyes. It was as if someone was behind the door. We just backed away from the door and literally ran. Once we stopped, she explained to me that it felt as if someone had a hold of the door handle and was pulling against it to stop us from getting in. I haven't ever seen a ghost or even sensed the presence of anything paranormal, but that's where my initial thoughts went. After a while, I considered that an earthly presence could have been behind the door. Could there have been a home invader in my apartment? I realized that I needed to notify the police, so I did. When the police arrived, my friend and I took the plunge and joined them in investigating. We went with the officer into my apartment, and he checked over the place, and then he called us in. Inside, I was asked a range of questions about my apartment. Is anything missing? Does anything look damaged? Does anything look out of place, etc.? We took a sweep over the apartment, but things seemed just as I had left them. The officer told me that there had been a few reported break-ins in the area. He told me to make sure that my doors were locked, and not to hesitate in calling the police if anything strange happens. The landlord came to my apartment at the officer's request, and the officer asked him, "Did anything happen in this room before?" The landlord said that no one had complained of anything spooky happening in there. He didn't believe in the supernatural, and he was quite dismissive of the subject. The police officer left, and the landlord and my friend and I stood outside the apartment and continued to talk. The doorknob started shaking like mad again. I had had enough at that point. I told him that I wanted to move out, and I would have someone come over and collect my things. He didn't complain. When I saw him to hand over the keys, he said that he was looking into getting a priest to come and rid the apartment of whatever was in there. It seemed as if he was no longer a skeptic. I sometimes speak with my work friend about what happened, and she says she still gets creeped out sometimes when she goes to open doors at night. I think I'm over the whole thing now, but now and then, just seeing a doorknob or overhearing some whispering or murmuring really frightens me. This is a strange and mysterious incident which happened to me deep in the mountains one night in late October. This happened about, 6 or 7 years ago. I was a student, and for some reason, amongst my friends and fellow students, it was really popular to camp in the mountains alone. Maybe we thought it was really zen and cool, or a test of courage. It didn't involve anything too taxing, no hiking or anything like that, just a simple one-person campout in the woods. It was like a rite of passage or something. Everyone would come back from their solo trip and have a story to tell. I wanted to give it a try for myself. I found a place to camp. It was in a little clearing. I set up my tent, made a little fire, cooked a meal, and enjoyed the simplistic pleasure of achievement this gave me. I have a vague memory of staring at the embers of the fire. It was hypnotic. I have no idea how long I was staring at the fire for, though. I was thinking of turning in for the night. The day's activities in the night air had taken a toll on me and made me sleepy. I casually looked up, and my eyes were drawn to the forest ahead of my camp. Just over the flicker of the fire, I saw a sea of dense trees. No more than 20 meters ahead of me, amidst those trees, I saw something pale. I stared at the trees, trying to figure out what I was looking at, and then I heard myself mutter, "Why is it only a face?" Because there, between the trees, I saw a face peering at me in the dark. The forest was pitch black, yet the face was visible, and like I said, I was about 20 meters away from the mouth of the woods. There was no reason why I should be able to see someone stood there without the aid of any light. The face floated. It seemed to be at points 10 meters off the ground. Usually in situations like this, people run away or scream, but I felt completely calm. After about a minute or two of watching the face in the woods, or perhaps a minute or two of the face in the woods watching me, it disappeared. I was sat there, mentally asking myself questions about what I had just seen. My eyes were naturally drawn back to the fire. And then the face, which had appeared in the woods, was suddenly just beyond the fire. Up close, I could see that the owner of the face looked to be about 40 years old. The expression was completely blank. One word came to mind out there in the woods when I saw it up close, and that word was void. I was freaked out massively. How was this even possible? In the time it took for me to look away from the woods, it was right next to my fire. I was really frightened, and I once again heard myself ask a question aloud. "What are you?" These words tumbled out of my mouth unintentionally. When I think about this incident nowadays, I am at a loss to why I wasn't in control of what I was saying that night. It was as if I was just responding with instinct, like the animals of the woods I was camping in, I suppose. Whatever I said seemed to have worked, because as soon as I posed my question, the face disappeared. That face appeared because it wanted something. I just don't think it realized I wasn't vulnerable until it came close. Thank God my instincts kicked in. When I read about all the missing people's cases which are reported across the world, somehow I remember that night, and I shudder. I wanted to share a story from a local magazine I found in Iwate Prefecture. The magazine deals with all manner of paranormal stories and folklore from Japan, and more specifically stories from Iwate. I used to love reading these stories on the train to work. One story stood out to me, as it was one of the only ones not set in Japan. It's an idyllic and unusual story, and I hope you like it. The person who shared their story was a female, and she used to live in Jakarta, with her husband. The night this experience took place was a humid summer night. One night she awoke to see a faint light in the corner of her bedroom. A face then emerged out of the darkness. As a crime prevention measure, the windows were fitted with a metal meshing on the outside of her home. Therefore, there would be no way for someone to get into her bedroom without coming in through the bedroom door. It was the dead of night when she started screaming. She woke her husband and said that she had seen someone in the bedroom. She was shouting for this person to get out and go away. She was scared half to death, and when she turned to her husband, she said he looked just as frightened as she was. "You saw her too?" she asked. "Yeah, a woman with a completely pale face was staring at us," her husband replied. There was no disagreement, no accusation of it being just a dream, and no argument for it being a prank could be justified. When they did manage to finally get back to sleep, she said that she suffered a terrible nightmare. She said about half a month later, her husband had a nightmare about the pale-faced woman, but this time her face was emerging from a corner of the ceiling. Apparently to her husband, the woman seemed to be more like a girl. From that day on, he would have recurring nightmares about her. The woman shared her story with a work colleague. He was an English gentleman, as she put it. His name was Michael, and he made some strangely frightening comments about her experience. "In this country there was a terrifying old custom. People once believed that in order to strengthen a building, or specifically a pillar, a human sacrifice would be necessary. They would stand a person up and cover them in concrete while they were still alive. Thankfully, they don't do this deplorable custom anymore. I've read that live birds took their place, but some customs are hard to break, and there are rumors that missing children are often used to strengthen pillars and buildings." She was shocked and disgusted and said that she had seen so many missing children cases in recent years. She asked if there was any truth to the rumor. The British man replied, "There could be. People claim to see ghostly faces emerging from corners of rooms and pillars. In fact, if an employee, such as a servant, wishes to quit their job without upsetting their employers, they can claim that they had seen a child's face in the ceiling, floor, pillar, wherever." He didn't appear to be joking or trying to trick her, she wrote. She considered her own experiences with the lack of human rights in some areas, and wondered if something so abhorrent could be true. Actually, the writer appeared to have a housekeeper of her own, and decided to tell the housekeeper about her husband's strange dreams, the young girl's face emerging from the wall. When she told the housekeeper, he just nodded and said, "Yep, I bet." She asked the housekeeper to explain what he meant, and he replied, "Well, I heard a story from a night watchman. He saw a face of a young girl in the bedroom. Also the painter, remember when we redecorated? He said he saw the same thing, a young girl's face coming right out of the ceiling. Moreover, he said he thought that he recognized her. Said she used to come in and get paint for her dad now and then. I told the guy to go home early that day. He didn't come back." Could this be true, she wondered? It was so specific. She was trying to pick holes in the story to disprove it, but late at night, the frightening possibility kept creeping back to remind her that there could be a person entombed in the walls. That possibility prevented her, time and time again, from getting a sound night of sleep. A few days later, the gardener said that he would be leaving, and she said that she didn't even need to ask why. The housekeeper stayed until she returned to Japan. I'm sorry, it doesn't really have much of an ending. I just thought it was an interesting and horrifying story to share. This happened more than 10 years ago. Back then I was living with my parents in our family home. It was just your run-of-the-mill family home, one I lived in since elementary school. I was out sick from high school. I was spending most of the day upstairs in my bedroom. I was up there, and I heard the front door open downstairs. That day I knew that my parents were out at work. I wasn't expecting anyone to walk right in. I thought for a second that I could have imagined the sound of the door opening, but about 2 minutes after I heard the door open, I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. I was scared that someone might have broken into our family home and was wandering around down there. All of my senses were alert. I strained my ears in the direction of the ground floor. I could definitely hear footsteps, and my heart sank when I heard those footsteps rising up the stairs. I suddenly felt unsafe in my own home. No, more than that, like there was a change in the atmosphere. The footsteps slowly approached. I was so scared I began to sweat. My breaths grew deeper and raspier, and I felt the beginnings of a panic attack blooming deep in my lungs. The footsteps had ascended the staircase and had finally stopped in front of my bedroom door. It wasn't my imagination, it couldn't be, and I felt for sure that there was someone just beyond my bedroom door. My worst fears were confirmed when I heard the doorknob move, as if a hand had grasped it. At this point I was so scared I couldn't even move. It was as if I was struck with sleep paralysis. I was stuck like this for some time, until I heard the footsteps disappear down the hall and back down the stairs. I was so petrified by the whole event, I couldn't move in my bed for at least an hour. I finally psyched myself up enough to leave my room. When I opened the door, I found that there was no one there. It was as if no one had been in the house at all. As I was looking over the house, my dad walked in. I told my dad what had happened, and he just scoffed and laughed. He said that he had unlocked the door to get in, so if someone was in here, they must have had a set of keys. This was the first in a line of strange and mysterious incidents which happened at my family home. Before, I had lived there for about 10 years and hadn't experienced nothing of the sort. My older sister had already moved out by the time this happened, but when she came to visit, I told her what happened. I expected her to laugh at me, but she just said, "Oh, it happened to you too, huh?" She went on to explain to me that she had experienced her own fair share of frightening incidents in our family home. She said that she didn't want to tell me because I was young when it happened. She said that once she was running upstairs and she heard footsteps running behind her as if they were chasing her. Another time she was lying in bed and she was pulled nearly clean off the bed by her ankle. She said that many strange things had happened when we were young, but she just didn't want to tell me. She didn't want to scare me. She said that she even tried to purify our house, but that didn't stop the strange goings-on. From the day I heard those footsteps, I was scared in my own home. I heard the footsteps frequently and occasionally suffered with sleep paralysis. I never experienced anything creepy anywhere else, so I just believed that my house was haunted. For some reason, I spoke about my house to a senior at work a few years later. And after I told him what had happened, he replied, "It's not a bad thing, you know." He said that he had had a similar experience, and according to him, footsteps can be a sign that family members who have passed are still present, as if they are watching over us. So if you hear footsteps, perhaps they don't mean you any harm, they're just here to visit. When he told me this, I felt such a rush of emotion. I felt sorry for being so frightened. I felt so appreciative, and for some reason, I just burst out in tears. From then on, when I heard something like footsteps at my parents' home, I kept my senior's words in mind and lived with gratitude. Eventually I got married and moved away. My father passed away too, so my mother just lives alone there. Sometimes I wonder if she's okay, living alone there, but then I remind myself that my family, who are no longer here, watch over her.